We have an awesome lineup of panelists in the book and gaming space to talk about the Weird West genre. For those new to the genre, it's a fun and diverse subgenre that combines the setting and aesthetic of the Old West with elements from other genres, like horror, sci-fi, and fantasy. I'm your moderator today. I'm KC Grifant, author of short stories and a supernatural Western series called Melinda West, Monster Gunslinger. I'm also co-chair of the Horror Writers Association chapter in San Diego, and I run the Weird West Fiction website. We're going to start with introductions. Everyone's going to introduce themselves, and then we'll start our conversation and leave some time for questions after. Richard, do you want to start?
I'll lead off. Since I'm the sole non-author on the panel. I'm Richard Carter. I'm currently lead design for Doomtown, which is a Weird West card game based in the CCG space, based on the Deadlands role-playing universe.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Ross Fisher Davis. I'm a writer. I work on assortment of TTRPGs. I've written for Vampire Masquerade and a little for Deadlands, and then a freelance writer on various different science fiction, horror, and fantasy.
Hi, I'm Shane Hawk. I'm a teacher, horror writer. I'm mostly known for writing Indigenous horror. I was going to write a weird West novella, but it fell through.
Keep it going, huh? Next year. My name is Eric J. Guignard. I'm a author, editor, anthologist, and I also run a small indie press called Dark Moon Books in the Inland Empire. My latest releases, Last Case at a Baggage Auction, novella, and That Which Grows Wild, a fiction collection through Cemetery Dance, available at Mysterious Galaxy Bookstore, and the next collection also from Cemetery Dance coming out next year.
Hi guys, I'm Kasey Lansdale, and for the purposes of this panel, I'm one of the publishers at Pandi Press. We put out our crime, mystery, and supernatural tales. I also write fiction.
Hi everybody, I'm John Palisano. I'm weird and I live in the West, so I guess that qualifies me. I've written a couple of weird fiction books. Try Not to Die in the Wild West is one. Another one coming out soon is Kung Pao Chip Magnet. It's coming soon, hopefully. And Dust of the Dead, and that is me.
Awesome. Our first question for the panelists is, what initially drew you to the Weird West? And what inspires your interest in this area? And feel free to jump in. We won't go down the line, just whoever wants to answer.
I think what draws me to it is I have my bachelor's in history. I'm a history teacher for sophomores. And just getting to explore these worlds that we just briefly mentioned in our classes with any supernatural monsters is really fun for me. And that's all I have to say.
I'm gonna say, I've just always loved history. Growing up, there's those old syndicated television shows, Rifleman and Bonanza, were always on TV. If I want to watch TV, there's some sort of a Western on. But besides just the Western genre, I've always just enjoyed the historic backgrounds. But Westerns in particular have just always been very raw, very straight-edged, good versus evil. The good guy's gonna come to town, he's gonna take care of the bad guys. But the nice thing with the weird Western is that we get to turn it on its head. I get to now add those supernatural elements. And especially for history, we know how history actually played out. We know what happens, but then to go back and subvert those ideas and to do the what if challenges, that's what really gets me excited, is to go back and say, no, I'm gonna throw in what if, this happened differently, if these people acted differently, if this invention was created, if the aliens or the zombies came down.
So speaking more as a reader and a fan, I think Weird West for me is more about the blending of the genres and how really Weird West can be whatever you want it to be as long as you hit a few certain highlights and you find the historical aspect that you want to focus on. I think it's more that it's a unique genre, because really you get to create what it is for you. And, you know, the guidelines are not really beyond just keeping it in those, you know, historical parameters, which is fun.
Well, taking it back to the original question, I think, a little bit, my first exposure to Weird West was Stephen King's The Dark Tower. And I think I'm not alone in that. I think there's a lot of people that really, their first exposure to something like that was like, this is not your daddy's Westerns. You know, there was a lot of supernatural elements and things, and that kind of blew the canvas wide open. And as a creator myself, I was really inspired by that at a young age, because it was like one of the first things I saw that blended genres. And it was just a really, an interesting thing to check out, because then I went and looked at like Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft and Weird Tales and saw how there was this like cross-collaboration of all these different genres happening. So it's a really interesting kind of canvas to play on.
I think my interest in the West comes from being English, of course. We have a bit more of an obsession with America, with it being this great spectator sport that America is, and it's the years of the Wild West are so hard to imagine as being real. They seem as removed from reality to us as, you know, Arthurian knights. So it feels so natural to mix in supernatural elements to them. It fits so beautifully. Just like how Arthur and his knights was, you had knights sat around a round table, and then one of them was a werewolf. You know, that's Arthurian stories. I feel it fits perfectly to do the exact same thing with Wild West era stories.
Since I work in basically a derivative property, based on Deadland stuff, so what drew me to it is it did have all those elements. It did have that you could be cowboys in all the basic elements of the Western, and then you go, and what about black magic? And what if there were zombies? And the guy with a robot arm. And you throw all those in, and you're like, and then when you add in the, you know, kind of, as mentioned before, some of the bullet points you have to hit with the West, a lot of towns were kind of insular, so you could easily go, it happens here, no one needs to know about it, 100 miles away. You know, part of that whole English fascination with the Wild West was, the Wild West was 10, 20, 50 times the size of all of England. So for them, it was, you know, it's mind-blowing to, is this that much land? And in that you can kind of insulate communities and have it be, not have to have an impact on a greater world outside of it. You can really have a story that's forcibly self-contained.
And for those who don't know, Deadlands was a popular role-playing game that spanned
It's a role-playing game currently in its 25th year and 4th edition, approximately, and that spans a California racked by earthquakes and turned into canyons, and Native Americans bringing spirit magic back, and black magic magicians raising dead. All those are all in one role-playing game, which then is a fertile ground for making a card game based.
My next question is, how has the Weird West evolved over time? It maybe started as classic Westerns with a ghost or a zombie, but seems to have really changed, especially in present times. So I was curious how you all saw that evolution, what you're seeing now for Weird Westerns.
I think there's definitely changes in how fiction's written and what kind of people have written fiction that is consumed in the last like 20, 30 years especially. Western was such a white male genre, and always was for decades and decades, and with the rise of popularity of like queer fiction and feminist focused fiction and such, that's seen a complete change in that we're seeing like much more female protagonists in all aspects of horror and sci-fi, but it's a brilliant ground for female characters in the Weird West as well. And there's so much more to explore than the traditional good, bad, ugly characters that exist. It gets so much, I guess fiction as a whole has just gotten weirder, not just the West, and I really like that. Yeah.
Weirder and realer.
In my opinion, the diversity is the biggest change that we've seen evolving in the Weird West genre. Besides that, I don't really see a lot of change, except that the degree of accuracy in history, and I think that's to do with the internet, that we have at our fingertips. We can look up any detail, we can get that. But as far as the weird factor, I mean, I feel like the old pulp stories that have been around, the dime store novels, they've always had, here's a ghost coming in to haunt the cowboy, or here's some sort of voodoo witchcraft that's coming up out of Santa Fe. So they've always been those kind of elements that are around that we still see today. But now today, we just like to push those boundaries and we make them a little bit louder, a little bit bigger, and now we can have that opportunity to cross media. I mean, just we get to do the Deadlands of gaming, and we get to have movies, and we get to have the tie-in with graphic novels and story arcs. I love Jonah Hex. I mean, I love it to death. And I mean, I grew up reading the DC comics, so then to see, here's the movie adaptation, and here's the other standalone stories from it, and there's just so much that can be grown just out of this one property. I think it's popular enough.
Well, and just, it's funny because, you're talking about, I can't not do it because it's so a part of what it is. Like, when my father was writing Jonah Hex 30-something years ago, it was not normal that, Weird West was in the conversation. He was doing something that at the time was considered very bizarre. And so even though there has been an evolution in what we include, I see it as an evolution of the fact that we're talking on a panel at Wondercon about weird Westerns. And it was not part of the regular conversation 30 years ago. And even the book that our company put out, it's more adventure horror. We put a female on the cover, and originally 10 years ago they said, oh, well, you can't put a female on the front of a Western or the book won't sell. Whereas with this one, we did, I wish I was kidding. It hurts me. It hurts my soul, and I'm tired. So we did a little test, and we put it out there, and this was the cover people liked. So it just shows you how much the mindset has changed, how much the conversation has changed, and it's no longer like, oh, they wrote this weird thing. It's like, it's just part of the pop culture now.
I got to interject just for a moment because you did the lead-in of your father, but you didn't say who your father is. They don't know out here.
Okay, so
only one of the greatest weird Western authors living today, and I said every one of my answers is going to revolve around him.
Thank you. Yeah, so my father is Joe R. Lansdale, and he wrote many weird Westerns, and he wrote, thanks, you guys. And he wrote many things that were not part of the conversation at the time. And I think that weird Western was one of the things that, dare I say, he pioneered to bring into the public consciousness.
So related to that, there seems to be a resurgence in the genre right now. As Kasey was saying, there are panels now on the Weird West, and that was never the case. Why do you think well, first of all, do you agree that there's a resurgence in interest in the Weird West? And if so, why do you think that is? Was there something in culture that prompted it? I have my theories, but I would like to hear what you guys think.
I feel like especially in the speculative fictions like sci-fi and horror, a lot of fans will really starve for new things and are constantly actively looking for new things now. And because there was a real dead zone throughout like the 90s and early 2000s where in film especially, there was new groundbreaking stuff really didn't start coming out, and you had to look into fiction and novels and indie published things to find something that was new or weird. Exactly like you said, with Joe Lansdale was writing stuff that no one had written before, but it was hard to find it, unless you were in those circles of unusual fiction. You had to look for it, and Weird West is still a little bit on the verge of being sort of untapped it hasn't been destroyed by Hollywood yet. But yeah, in seeing it like a resurgence, I think we see it in stuff like The Mandalorian, which is huge and has many Western tropes in it. And then we have films like Borderlands coming out that uses a lot of Western tropes. And also in video games. Like there seems to be a focus in the Weird West appearing in video games. Even in just the last like 3 years, there's 4 or 5 Weird West themed video games. And it just appears to be sort of sprinkling in the public consciousness more than ever before in these last like 5 years alone, I think.
I think there's one called Weird West, actually, a video game that came out a year or 2 ago. John?
I think too that a lot of Westerns in general are getting a lot more notoriety in literary circles and more notable circles. I think if you look at something like Cormac McCarthy's, Blood Meridian, or the work of Stephen Graham Jones, that's they're just eating awards for breakfast like Pac-Man. I think that those readers are looking for more once they have those experiences. And I think that is breaking down a lot of walls. It's not just a genre thing, it's not just a limited thing. It is now becoming a wider readership and viewership. Like you mentioned too, a lot of the film things, they're having Western tropes in them. The Mandalorian is a brilliant example. They literally were doing that. And John Carpenter before that was doing that. And The Walking Dead is really a Western, and the comics even more so than the show. So I think those kinds of properties are bringing people to the table. So it's a really great and interesting time to see that. And I think that speaks to why there's some kind of a resurgence happening. I mean, because there's this new respect for these stories.
I think there might be also a factor of this new generation, being stuck on scrolling on TikTok, short attention spans, just having technology everywhere, surveillance states, constant technology, exploring, science fiction, cyberpunk. Cyberpunk had its moment, but I think it's kind of dwindling now a little bit. And then, as a setting, super simplistic times going back to the West, with literally horses, with small towns, insular towns, and especially when you're getting into like speculative, leaning more toward horror, that's like a perfect setting to have, a slasher come in or a monster, something that can happen and be self-contained within a small little town, or even traveling a little bit outside of that. It's a really good setting to explore anything.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that because I think the point of we are, I think, as a people wanting to go back to a simpler time when there weren't, where all of your news did not come from your phone, where there wasn't people fighting constantly on Twitter, where there wasn't all of this information with zero facts behind it. I think we all desperately miss a simpler time, if not a better time, a simpler time. And I think that's also an important distinction, because it's not that things were so great for everybody 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, but for better or for worse, they were simpler.
I'd like to add, I think there's been growth in the horror genre overall recently, right? Horror kind of goes up and down, but I think the indie horror community in particular has sort of helped this resurgence. There's a subgenre called splatter westerns, which takes extreme horror in a western setting, and those have been really popular.
What was that called? That term?
Splatter westerns.
Oh, splatter western.
Yeah. I think Deadhead Press
Yeah,
is the one that spearheaded that.
Fantastic covers.
Yeah, there's good covers, pulpy.
There's one of them. Hey, show that up to everybody. Yeah, that's amazing. That artwork is
Hold on.
nothing
Red.
beats that. Yeah.
I'm in. That's correct. So should that.
So let's move to kind of the creating side of things. This question is for the authors and game developers. What challenges do you encounter when creating a Weird West setting or character or storyline in your books and games?
I'm gonna say, biggest challenge for me personally is I want authenticity in my writing. I want it to be historically accurate as far as the details, the setting, especially the language. I don't want to write like, here's a valley boy from LA, been raised in the 90s, writing, but I want to really capture that 80s, but without it being cliche, without it sounding like Louis L'Amour. So it's kind of trying to find that balance where you read it, it fits in and says, this is the Western tone, but it's still a very distinctive voice that I can own, that I can say, I like to write across a lot of different genres, and I like to write across a lot of different time eras, anything between 1850 through 1970, and each era has its own voice. But at the end of the day, it's me and my narrative style that is showcasing that voice to a new readership. So I think that's always my personal biggest challenge.
What about in the, John?
And to piggyback off of that, I think the biggest challenge that I've had, in addition to that, is finding ways to subvert the tropes, but also serve the tropes. Because you don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you don't want to kind of like make everything where you know what's going to happen after 5 pages or 5 minutes of the thing. So it's kind of hard to kind of figure out like what can you do to kind of make things a little bit interesting and then still deliver the goods expectations. That's always I think that's a challenge with anything you write, but definitely in something like a Western where there are expectations of things that you want to have in those kinds of stories.
Yeah, and the tropes are tropes for a reason.
Yes.
I mean, it's figuring, and if you deviate too far from them, you have exited the Western genre and you've entered somewhere else. So you have to know where the lane lines are and bounce casually between them, like a kid playing bumper bowling. You'll get to your goal. It might be a little more wander. And yeah, in terms of the challenge, also similar to the element that was mentioned earlier, is there's so much information and research available at our fingertips. You go, okay, what was this area? What were they calling their local creeks or whatever? Because they've all now official names after going through national registries and stuff. What did they call it? And so we can find those things and be accurate. And then getting the language right. I'm iffy on that. I'll be honest, because like similar to the Deadwood, F-bombs were not dropped at that time period with that regularity.
7 times a sentence.
But what they considered vulgar at the time, the modern viewer, reader, would be, that's not vulgar. I'm not feeling the vulgarity of this particular character if you use period accurate language. You'd have to then use interjections from the listeners. Go, oh, that's so vulgar. I read this and no, this is my third grader is got worse language than this. But so that's where you have to tailor to the audience reading so that it definitely still catches their right visceral response.
I have a question about it, because I don't write in that genre as much, so this is really me asking. So how much of it, when you cater to the more modern audience, how much of the authenticity of the Western language and the Western environment is lost? And how much do we just decide that that's okay because we're creating our work for a new audience? Like where is that line, and where is it appropriate to use that language that's of the time and to allow your characters and your atmosphere to create the tension more than the words? And where are those word enhancements, if we will, important? So I don't know that I really need an answer, but it's something that I find interesting as just listening to you guys have that conversation.
I think that's one of the things I love about the Weird West, right? You have the liberty to kind of move around the historical accuracy, right? You're not bound to it necessarily. You can create an alternative history, right? You can bring in all these elements and you have more freedom. So I think in that sense, right, you can go the whole range of language. Maybe people would introduce more modern language, maybe not. It's kind of all up for grabs, right?
Yeah, I would say anything goes as long as you're consistent. Consistency is key in that.
Because the readers will notice.
The next question is for the editors, publishers, but anybody can answer too. Are you noticing certain trends in Weird West storylines from authors or types of Weird West stories that readers are looking for. Kasey or Shane, any thoughts there?
Okay, I'll do it. So, because it kind of follows up to that question, right? Because as a publisher, when people are submitting those works, I'm trying to stay authentic to the genre. So sometimes if I read something that has a modern language, I might go, I don't know, because like this to me doesn't feel like a Western. So how much of that is my inherent bias of what a Western is, and how much of that is open for interpretation? You know, so as a publisher, you want to, like you were saying, you want to honor the tropes and make sure that you're hitting those things, but also speaking to the current audience. So I think for me, the books that we have chosen are books that we enjoy and believe in. So it's been less about like, we want to do this kind of book, and we're like, oh shit, I really like that book. The world deserves this book. So I think as a publisher, it's like following up with that question of what is authentic, and also at the end of the day as a publisher, just deciding I like the work or not.
I mean, I have something little to add. I did some slush reading for something, for a magazine, and they were writing Weird West, and I noticed a trend that I hadn't really seen too much across some of the classic ones, but I saw a really big push for cathartic horror, wherein, like say the main character or a supporting character, it kind of gets flipped. It would be from a marginalized community historically, and it would kind of turn into kind of a revenge story where you know, the readers can really root for this person who historically probably wasn't in that situation, but you know, through escapism, you can kind of imagine what it could have happened if history was different. And so I see a trend in that.
Yeah, I think it sort of fits with the trend of more diverse, like horror stories and diverse literature overall. We're also seeing that in a lot of Weird Westerns. Any other thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I probably shouldn't say this, but the more diverse horror and Weird Westerns. Is it?
There's two
You know,
women here.
I mean,
yeah.
but is it? You know, and I mean, so we're having these conversations, but are we really executing what we think we're executing?
Yeah.
And who are we having those conversations for? And I think that that's important to acknowledge.
Any other thoughts on that? All right, what about recommendations? What are one or two or a few of your favorite Weird West stories, whether it's movies, books, games, what maybe first drew you to the genre, or something you really love? John, you mentioned Dark Tower, that's a great one.
Yeah, definitely. Dark Tower series is great. There's a great compendium of Weird Tales, the Best of Robert E. Howard, which is a lot of Conan and the Western kind of things in there. Like we mentioned, the Death's Head Press books are phenomenal, and they do have some diverse authors in there, which is really interesting. They definitely have some new takes on things. Like I really liked Haley Piper's take on things was really cool. And again, Cormac McCarthy's Blood Meridian, and pretty much anything from Stephen Graham Jones, because even when he's not doing westerns, he kind of is. You know, and he's just an amazing writer too. If you want to be on the pulse of somebody that's going to get your blood boiling, those would be my biggest ones right now. And of course, Joe R. Lansdale. A book that I love is Dead in the West, which is one of my favorite books. So definitely look for that one too. Yeah, you know. So.
I brought a visual aid. It's the Legend of Charlie Fish, Joshua Roundtree. I think it's great. It's a quick read. It's set in Texas. You know, I think that's probably my top pick. So rather than sitting here and giving you a list to add to your TBR pile, I'm going to say try that one, Legend of Charlie Fish.
That's a great one. Love it.
Going down the row, I'm gonna reiterate Jonah Hex because I grew up on that. And I'm also gonna reiterate Joe R. Lansdale, even though he's mentioned, but I'm gonna say Dead Man's Road specifically, which is a collection of short stories of Reverend Mercer. Mercer, but yeah, those stories are just so fun and they encapsulate everything what a weird Western should be. It has that pulpy feel, they're fast-paced, they're quick, they're violent. There's unapologetic, great tales. Blood Meridian, as John mentioned, my absolute favorites. I mean, I must have reread that novel like 40 times over. That's just like a study guide of how to write. And I'm also a big fan of Gemma Files, and she has a Hexslinger series of magic realism that's placed into the West. So my picks.
I'll say Red Rapid. If anyone's heard of this one, it's out of Tor Nightfire. I forget how to pronounce his last name, but it's Alex Grecian. Grecian. Yeah, Grecian. That one's amazing. It was a 5-star read easily. I listened to it on audio. The narrator's amazing. He does all the voices, and he breaks out into a song with the guitar. It's really immersive, and it's a really good book.
One I read when I was much younger and really got me into the genres a lot is Garth Ennis's Preacher. Because of course Weird West can be contemporary in many ways. There's a lot of fantastic modern Western stories, and the sub-story of the Saint of Killers is an all-time fantastic Weird West character. And I think that story inspired me a lot. And but then it was also I used to play the game Doomtown when I was about 14, and that uses so many elements of like Lovecraft is quite heavily used in it, and a lot of different, and Robbie Howard as well. A lot of different writers worked into it wonderfully, and that was hugely inspirational for me as well. It's like one of my earliest favorite Weird West content.
And I'm just up here taking notes on what books I need to read.
I will mention Lone Women as well by Victor
Levay. Yeah, it's great.
It's a great book. What about movies or TV shows? I gotta give a shout out to Winona Earp, which is a contemporary Western that is very fun. Good vibes of Buffy and just kind of unique.
I would say Outer Range. I'm excited for season 2. I hope it leans more into the supernatural in season 2, but that's really good with Josh Brolin.
One that's coming up soon that is definitely heavily Western influenced is the Fallout TV show. That was a great trailer, and I still swear that Walton Goggins was just made in a lab to star in Western content, because he looks like he walked out of that era. He's going to be great, so I'm really looking forward to that.
I do watch TV, but nothing is coming. Like I saw Lessons in Chemistry the other day.
I enjoyed what a couple years ago was Godless.
Oh, excellent! Yeah.
That was okay.
Well
Let's take the story and go. Yeah, let's remove all the men. What do you do now?
Yeah.
You make do is what you do.
No, but it's an interesting take. It really is. It's fact because there's so much of that, especially in the Western genre. So how do you take that away and go, okay, what's the new tropes?
Yeah.
You know, that's the stuff that I find really interesting. I like when there's a little bit of an emotional challenge. You know, otherwise, what are we doing?
Tell the same story over
Yeah,
and over.
and
Really
if there's not a
what
moment where you're a little
yeah.
uncomfortable, then the fiction is not working.
Yeah. I mean, the earlier maligned Louis L'Amour, you got several of those, the Western genre and trope was, okay, how many of these are actually different stories? Or just, okay, now he's a redhead. And
Right.
they call him Red. Okay, cool. Is that a different story? Or is that just the same story sliced on the bias?
You got 2 cruel cow hands instead of 3 this time.
And the real bear. No.
If we're gonna go back a few eras, I'm gonna back it up. Then if you're talking about like favorite kind of weird Western shows, I still love Firefly, and I know everybody in the room probably would say Firefly. Dude, that's still near and dear to my heart, even though they haven't been on air for they haven't had anything new for 20 years. Although they have some tie-in novels that have come around.
I will continue to catch flack for always stopping and watching Wild Wild West. I mean, it is enjoyable. You don't have to have too many parts of your brain on, but really, are you looking for that when you're looking for escapism? So.
Well, and it brought it to a wider audience. It brought it to people who would never, ever play in the Weird West world, So it's like everything has its purpose like that.
Who remembers that old Bruce Campbell show, Briscoe County?
So there's been stuff. It's just where it peaks and then drops off and becomes the next cookie cutter project that
well, all you hear is nobody wants a Western, and then a Western comes out, and you're like, what? Somebody wants a Western.
Nobody wants Western, nobody Western. Yellowstone? Oh, yeah. Everyone's going to watch that. How about we go Yellowstone prequels? Yes. We'll eat all that for lunch. But we can't get any other Western properties to be exciting. Come on. I don't know.
Cowboys and Aliens wasn't that bad.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was wondering if somebody was
Oh yeah, everybody. That was so mainstream too. That was like the epitome of if you like Weird West. I mean, you're Cowboys.
Yeah, it is. But I mean,
That was a highlight.
Had some twists off of John Carter, which. But it had to.
Well, I
that
think
was
that was
classic.
marketing. They should have named that in a different way.
That's my son over there sitting is a John Carter. We put him by a few movie posters.
Right. It's cute.
Speaking of media, is there anything upcoming in the Weird West genre that you all are excited about? Maybe a Doomtown release?
Oh!
Yeah.
John Lansdale's movie, The Thicket, is coming out this fall. Oh my God, it's such an amazing book. Starring Peter Dinklage. Peter Dinklage in the West. It's more of a hardline Western rather than the weird, except for the horror and adventure element. But that book is so amazing.
I too am excited about that.
And Blood Meridian too, the movie finally. Oh, it's supposed to come out when? This fall also. Blood Meridian, they filmed it last year. Yeah. No, I didn't. They've been talking about that, how the possibility to make Blood Meridian into a movie.
I can only hope they slate it on the same day that The Thicket comes out. That'd be perfect.
3 weeks apart, so they can write the press and then the other. So gotta make the budget work.
What about Doomtown? What's coming up with that?
Doomtown, we did a release. Timelines, I gotta work in my head. Last year we did a new base set, so we get new players in with a kind of a ground floor for new players entry. 8 months ago, we had our next expansion that released, giving more cards for everybody, and I got another one in playtest right now. I've got notes in my bag so I can keep working on the changes that need to be made as things go. And we keep playing because we don't know any better. I've been playing this game for 25 years in one variation or the other, and I'm real good with change.
Anyone else? Any other concepts?
Kristen, what about your book?
So I have my second Weird West book is coming out next year, and I'm also working on a Weird West card game with my partner Jason Blue over there. It's a fast-paced Texas Hold'em style game, so that'll be coming out next year. Thank you. Last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. If you could give just one recommendation of somebody totally new to the genre, where they should start. We talked a lot about different books we liked. I think Dark Tower and Dead in the West are probably two that rise to the top. Are there any others you would say, here, start with this, welcome to the Weird West?
Did you have that?
I hear mythology. Not mythos, but I gotta be honest. I would honestly, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna do it. I would say The Magic Wagon by Joe R. Lansdale.
Good one.
Yeah, I'll go with an anthology. I love anthologies. I'm a short story author, reader, anthologist at heart. Any person that is interested in just dipping their toes in. An anthology is a compilation of a variety of short stories by different authors, and that'll give you just a little taste of all the different styles and the different techniques. Just like Shane just put out one. Your dad had a seminal one, a Razor Saddles, back in the 1980s that I have on my shelf, and that has just so many great stories.
He fed us a lot. He bought my shoes. Look, like, apparently we found the one guy that's been buying all these books. Thank you so much. My childhood was really great. I appreciate it.
Those writers' mansions you got.
That's right.
So the anthology, I think you're thinking of Jonathan Mayberry's.
Yeah, Jonathan Mayberry's one, The Good, the Bad, and the Uncanny. That one just came out a couple of months ago. Is a good one. And Shane, you can probably talk more about yours. This is a great opportunity.
Oh, it's not Weird West though.
Oh, it has this kind of tones to it.
A little more contemporary, but
I was gonna say the Magpie Coffin, the first in that series by Death's Press. I think it was Wiley E. Young. That's a great entry into the Weird West.
And of course the Doomtown game. That's a great place to start.
I'm still taking notes on the to be read list. So.
Great. Let's open it up to audience questions if we have any. If not, I have a few more.
I think it's an exciting time where they're taking properties that we may have seen, like Dune in the 80s, and then they're bringing it back and just full force making it super cool. Is there a movie or a fiction that's been done that you would like to see again? Kind of upgraded?
Jonah Hex movie.
Yeah.
Please.
They could use a do-over.
I really liked The Quick and the Dead with Sharon
that was great,
Stone.
yeah.
That would be cool to redo. Yeah.
Desperados.
Or Silverado.
No. It was.
Yeah, I agree with Desperado. Or even like go back to a Young Guns, you know, find a new brat pack of cast and give might need to be 2 generations forward on that, but give a new generation their Young Guns.
Would you guys consider like the Van Damme movie Cyborg, like a Weird Western?
Yes, the post-apocalyptic genre and the Weird West genre kind of cross over in different ways, because again you go with the insular communities, a certain tolerable level of lawlessness.
The weird flashbacks with revenge.
Yeah, the revenge tropes, all the tropes cross over, right? Cyborg. That's a deep cut. I like it.
Yeah, I know. I've been preaching that gospel for like the last year to everybody. It's like, it's the best Van Damme movie ever. Well, second to Nowhere to Run. But definitely like Cyborg is like the Western one for me. Westworld.
Yeah, Westworld's a fun one.
I'm tired of remakes. I want some new stuff. I mean, there's so many talented authors looking to place their stuff. You know, it's not like we're at a shortage of good material. It just needs a home.
Another question here first, Jenna.
Since Weird West mixes West with a lot of other genres, can you think of any genres it's never been mixed with, or doesn't mix well with?
Interesting.
I can't think of any that it wouldn't mix with, yeah.
So,
It's like vanilla. It'll mix with any flavor you can put in there.
I've not yet seen a Western rom-com. I mean, that could be interesting.
Kung Fu. There's a lot of books about it. My grandma has one stack.
I think by definition it mixes with anything. You can mix the Weird West genre with absolutely anything and create.
I'm trying to think of something that it hasn't been mixed with that we're missing in the tableau.
by its definition, there needs to be the weird element, right? Something speculative, typically. Everybody defines it a little differently, but I think it really goes with everything. It'd be cool to see a rom-com weird Western though.
The challenge, like, find something that won't pair well. Make it happen.
I think we're just.
A question here?
You guys are talking about what the oldest Weird West was. And I was wondering, do you guys ever read The Californios by Louis L'Amour? Okay, Louis L'Amour's The Californios is about a guy who goes looking for gold in the hills of California and finds an immortal Aztec priest living in a spaceship. It's a departure from his usual, yeah, but I was astonished when I read it 2 years ago. Where has this been? But it predates just about every Weird West that I can think of, certainly earlier than Dark Tower.
The Haunted Mesa is usually the one that people think of. Louis L'Amour is one weird Western.
That's what I was trying to think of, yeah, the Mesa.
Yeah. Okay. Was there a question over here? Okay. Any other questions? I have one. What is a trope that you're tired of seeing in Westerns or weird Westerns? Anything that just really bugs you? For me, it's the prostitute with the heart of gold. I'm very tired of that.
I was just gonna say the stereotypical characters. I mean, the stereotypes of they're just as you said, straight laced. Here's an Indian. Here's a crooked sheriff. Here's a cowboy. But they have as many depths and personalities as modern day.
I think the Western genre struggles a lot with stereotyping, especially racial stereotyping. It has a history built on it, and often you don't need to describe a Western main character because by duty of it being a Western, you probably know what kind of character it's going to be. So that's something that I think writers have to struggle to avoid and need to be criticized for not being really that Western if you mess too much with stereotypes. So it's you really have to work against what the genre has done to cultures and whole races of people in its history.
That's where, as an author, you can have some fun with that because, particularly if you write it in a first-person setting, as far as my eyes can see, I can't tell you anything. I mean, I can tell you about these, but the rest of how this looks. So I've read some books where they go whole sections, and then the main looks into the mirror and describes like, no way, no, what I built up here was not what you just showed me. And you got that twist, and so you can do that with, set up a main character of a marginalized community, and until somebody else calls them a Chinaman or whatever, you're going like, oh, hold on. But your internal dialogue has no dialect elements or whatever. Your internal dialogue is always free of any inflections that would throw that out to the reader. So be like, no. All right, I'm on my head. You've got me. I'm twisted. Now let's follow this. That's something you can do.
Maybe the trope of a macho Gary Sue walking into a town.
Unless he's wearing a dress.
I have to say the salon doors also really annoy me because apparently they're not historically accurate, right? It was just a Hollywood invention where they just burst through those salon doors. Yeah. It was just a regular door, apparently, usually.
Because those doors don't
Say it
really
ain't
good.
so. Say it ain't so.
Ruined.
It chases away.
Any other audience questions? Time for one more? No? Okay. Then let's hear where people can find you and your work, website, social media, any exciting projects coming up you want to share. Let's start at this time. So, John.
You can find me anywhere on social media under John Palisano. I'm pretty easily found. These days I'm really enjoying making very weird videos on TikTok about the lizards and stuff that crawl on my patio, and I talk to them, and it's very fun. So yeah, John Palisano, Facebook.com, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, Twitter X, whatever.
I'm gonna say John Palisano because all I want y'all to do is go see these lizard videos. No, you can find, I'll do the company is Pandi Press, Pandi Press, and that's got our new releases, and we keep our blog and socials current. So come say hello.
I have my own website, my name, ericjguignard.com. My latest updates are there. I'm editing an anthology out through HarperCollins that will be released next year called Scaring and Daring Adventures, which takes supernatural and fun twists on literary classics written for a middle grade audience.
You can find me at shanehawk.com. I'm still selling this book, Never Whistle at Night, through Penguin. We're trying to work on volume 2 right now.
My last published work was last year's Vampire the Masquerade's Trails of Ash and Bone. It was I really enjoyed working on that. And other than that, yeah, I'm online on Twitter occasionally, and I put up a lot of my own just original side of work at absenceoflove.blogspot.com. It's just my own private one. And before you say no real author has a blog spot, I'd like to say George R. R. Martin updates his all the time.
More often than he does.
Most definitely.
Oh, shots fired. And then for all things Doomtown, Pine Box Entertainment is where we are. It's a fan-based group that took over publishing the game after AEG decided it was no longer good for their bottom line. And we're all people with real day jobs and making games on the side.
Okay, and I'm at kcgrifant.com and also on socials with the same name. Thank you to our awesome panelists, and thank you to the audience.
Thank you, Kasey, for inviting